I wrote No Ordinary Boy because I wanted to capture a portion of Owen's life. I wanted to chronicle it, put it in a document, a kind of a monument to him, to share his story with others and to share my experience with others. And there's a couple of motivations for that. One of them being that, Owen himself actually left very little evidence of his own life behind him. He was non-ambulatory, non-verbal. He was unable to produce or create things on his own. His entire experiences were around interaction and being in the moment and experiencing life, but there was very little record of that and very little evidence of a trail. I think about my other son Angus and all of the things that he's left behind, or all of the evidence I would leave behind of my own life. And for Owen, there was just very little of that. So I wanted to capture not as much as I could. Obviously, No Ordinary Boy is quite a slim volume, but I wanted to capture some of it. I have other mechanisms to capture his life as well. I have my blog, and we have all of our personal experiences, and there's a rich kind of oral collection of stories with his caregivers and all the people who encountered Owen. But anyway, back to the book itself, I wanted to capture elements of his story to share it back with the world, I guess. And one of the other things I had noticed through my whole experience with Owen over the 12 years is so many of my own decisions in healthcare were based on one person's professional experience with a very narrow portion of society. So, we'd encounter a neurologist or a neurosurgeon or a particular therapist, and they would have this rich experience, but it was quite, it was narrow, and it was based on aggregated statistics, it was based on data, it was based on, likelihoods and risk and all these things, and I was personally missing anecdotes and stories from real people. So when Owen passed away, it became interesting and important to me to see if I could just offer up a piece of our experiences so that other families might connect with it, learn from it, add it to their collection of information. And Google can only do so much. I remember the early days with Owen and me. I would read some memoirs, I would look at other stories, and rather than looking for ways to connect with those families or to connect to the material, I would be looking for ways to prove to myself or to tell myself that Owen was different, that this was not going to be our experience, that Owen would live longer, that I would do better, I would manage. I was looking for the differences, and I was looking for how, this was not my story. So I think as we mature into the process and as we grow with our families, we eventually start to look for connection as opposed to looking for differences. One of my hopes for No Ordinary Boy is that parents might read the story and maybe not connect with some of the specifics in it, or maybe feel some fear, that those things will naturally happen. But what I ultimately hope is that parents would see that there are many ways to move through life, to move forward with their children, that there's not just the one way that the one person or the one institution set forth for them, that they can engage with healthcare in a way that makes sense for them, that they can educate their children, they can care for their health, they can give them a quality of life that may or may not have been prescribed previously, and that they have the right and the responsibility to look at every decision along the way as an actual decision that they're making, as opposed to following the natural path that an institution put out for them. We were bombarded with plans and goals and worksheets and measurable outcomes and checklists and assessments and all of these things from 6 different, sometimes 10 different clinics. We were in physio, occupational therapy, augmentative communication, and then there was all of this hold up his head, swallow, drink, respond, blink, every bit of his body you could try to harness. That's what we were, there was a different binder for every one of these things. So in Owen's case, the entire system came down on us in a very crushing way. For other families who are experiencing it in bits and pieces, it might be reasonable to have one binder or 2 binders and, one worksheet, and that's something that they work towards over time. So I'm not suggesting in any way to throw out the system and for every family to seek alternatives and to homeschool, and that's absolutely not my recommendation. But I think maybe if I could come up with a universal message in the book, it would be that the process is more important and valuable than the outcome itself. So engage with your child and be a family and see if you can integrate some of the goals into everyday life, but don't make every waking minute about that. In No Ordinary Boy, I talk a lot about how I started out as this very high achiever in the therapy world, pleasing everybody, working on everything, trying to consolidate everything, into coming up with my own worksheets to share back to the therapist. And I was rewarded for that. I was, people were applauding me, and it was, we were all so happy that everybody was working so hard. And I eventually decided I'd look at, especially because I had another son who was 2 years younger than Angus, or 2 years younger than Owen, who was typically developing. I thought, why is this so out of balance? I'm working so hard with Owen and for Owen and expecting him to work so hard, and there's Angus typically developing and has none of these same requirements or expectations, and I'm not expected to work so hard with him. And why is it that what is it about the normalization that's so important? So over time, through the book, I outline how I let a lot of that go. I eventually take him out of school. I eventually actually remove him from all conventional therapies. And, I can only know this in hindsight, but it was actually just in time. Owen passed away about 2 years after I stopped all of these therapies. And it was a very surprising, sudden death, and a peaceful death, which I'm thankful for. And I'm also thankful for the fact that he had these 2 golden years of freedom and experiences and connection with people, and my whole perspective on life changed in those 2 years as to what I thought of as quality of life for him and for us. And letting go of all of those things before he died actually is what has allowed me to look back without regret. And I would wish the same for everybody, that they can look back without regret. One of the things I say in my book is that I literally did live every day, going to bed, looking back on the day and thinking, if this were the last day, would it have been good enough? And most of the time, the answer was yes.